Good morning. Welcome, everybody. This is our Filmmakers Life interview series, which is really my opportunity to talk to filmmakers who have already built a career in the industry, and which is what most of the people who come to the interview series are also wanting to do. So one of the things I think we've found doing these interviews for the last couple of years is that no two filmmakers' path in their career is the same.
Yep, that's true.
We got that very, very clear. There's no way, but it still, I feel, is very useful because we can get ideas from what everybody else has done. So I want to introduce myself. One second. My name is Joanne Butcher. I'm a business coach and a fundraising specialist, and I help filmmakers raise money. It's about as simply as I can say it. I help filmmakers raise money. I work with fiction filmmakers and documentary filmmakers. There are many, many, many different ways of raising money as a filmmaker and earning money as a filmmaker. It doesn't just have to be raising the money. I just like to have my clients anyway raise the money they need to make their films before they make the film, so that they can, anything they earn afterwards is going to them. And today I'm very, very excited to introduce you to RS Veira. We have just met, and I'm going to get to ask questions and find out everything about you. Everything.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm half Trinidadian, so I was very excited to see your proudly displayed Jamaican flag. And
I was watching I was telling Emily, I was watching your interview with Gian and Sophie. So that's where I learned that you were Trinidadian.
Yes, exactly. I'm working on a project with them right now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So my first question always is the same. It is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
Oh, that is such a great question. It was a journey. It was not something I immediately stepped into. It was something I had to eventually claim. When I first moved out to LA, I was 23. I was really focused on writing. I was working on my first couple of books.
But I don't mean that. I mean probably way before that.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like way before?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when did you know? When did you first be like, wait? And I'll tell you one story I always tell. I didn't know I was a filmmaker then, but just so you know, when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I would have dreams that ended with the end.
Okay, you're talking about that. Okay, I would have to say then, when I went to the first Harry Potter movie, I was just like,
young.
Man,
you are young.
My school actually took a trip to the theater, so like I'm that young.
Where was that school, by the way?
In Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
But yeah, I was watching the movie and I was just like, man, I would love to make something like this. I would love to figure out how to take the words on the page and make this.
That's a very grown-up thought.
Yes. Now, how was it? Now, I had no idea I was going to eventually become a filmmaker, but I just had the thought of, I would love to do that.
That's amazing because, years ago, one of the things I did, I used to teach at this, what is it called? Anyway, for kids who are in the justice system, right? And this organization literally walked them out of jail into the classroom and them their GEDs and all that kind of thing. So anyway, I was teaching there one day and I was telling the kids, when next time you go and watch a movie, when it's over, I want you to stay and watch the credits. And every credit that goes by, I want you to say, I could do that job. I could do that job.
I love that.
I could do that job, right? So, because I think that what you saw, which was there was some relationship between something to do with writing and getting something, it's already a very sophisticated thought.
Because honestly, Joanne, I couldn't really understand how they translated the words to the screen. Because I read this book and then like because some of this, I guess the scenes that really got me were the scenes that had no dialogue. I was like, how did they know to make this scene and how they know it would relate to this feeling or this moment in the book? You know what I'm saying? I was
Yeah.
just curious. That fascinated me.
Yeah, and that's also a particular thing to go from an adaptation, right? To go from reading
Yes.
a book and then, but still, I think that's a very sophisticated thought.
Thank you.
About somebody at your age, and but so that sounds to me like definitely, because I don't think most people think like that. I have to say, I don't think most people think like that. So then when did it sort of become something actual in your life?
Okay, so that goes back to the story I was going to tell earlier.
Yeah.
So I moved out to LA. I was about 23. I was focused on writing, so I was working on my first book, and I had the dream of eventually becoming a screenwriter. And God's interesting. He always, at least in my experience, he magnifies our dreams, or he increases our horizons. You know, like we think I had this very basic dream of screenwriting. He was like, "Oh no, you're a filmmaker." So now how that happened was I published my first couple of books. I was working at the Apple store, and a friend of mine's a producer, and he asked me, because he heard about my books, to write a script for a commercial. I'd never written a script before. So I was like, sure, because I've learned just take the opportunity and figure it out. So I took it, wrote it. Nothing came of it, but he liked it enough that he was like, hey, let's make a short film. Do you have another script? So I transformed one of my short stories into a script, and we made that. That was my first short film. It never saw the light of day. Yeah, it was not one of the ones you saw. And so that was my struggle, though. So I claimed I was a writer, but I was really struggling to say I'm a filmmaker because I never completed the film. So I happened to be at the Apple store again, and this is again just a grace of God. I'm sitting there in this period of kind of listlessness, and this woman comes in who eventually would become my mentor. Just kind of walks into the store, and she just marches up to me, and she asks, "Can you help me with my phone?" I'm like, "Of course." We start talking, and she has this incredible story about being in the industry and faith. And she just asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Huh." I was like, I kind of want to write. She's like, "No, no. What do you really want to do? Like, you need to make it very clear and definitive." And I was like, "You're right." So that was in my brain for a couple of days. And eventually I was like, you know what? I am a filmmaker. I am a storyteller. And it's funny how once I claimed that, things just moved very quickly. Then we made those short films. Then I went on the journey to make my feature. And, now I'm here.
Wait. Who is this woman who walks in the store and says,
oh, her name is Denise.
So it's very interesting, because I've met some really fabulous people in an Apple store. I've met some very fabulous people. But it's always a little awkward. I've given people my card, that kind of thing. But I always think it's a little awkward, so how did you actually stay in touch with this person whose phone you were working on?
So basically, we just became very quick friends, because once that initial interaction happened, she was like, "Hey, let's continue to talk. Let's sit down and really kind of figure out like what you want to do." So when we had that conversation and I had that realization I'm a filmmaker, we sat down, we talked, and it was like, okay, let me just learn from you. Like, teach me what I need to do, because she worked on some things with Oliver Stone, so she had some history in the industry. So she just gave me some tidbits of like really perseverance. Just decide what you want and keep working towards it.
And so are you still in touch with her today?
Oh yeah, yes, exactly. She is.
Fantastic.
I was blessed to have many great mentors.
Yeah.
She was the first of many.
I think that that's a very interesting thing. What do you think that it takes to be somebody who can be mentored?
Humility. That's the number one thing I've learned, that I had to come to the point of understanding I don't know everything, and actually I know very little, especially if I'm going into a new industry. So when I was in college, I played Division I basketball, and to get to that point, I learned that I had to humble myself and grind. So I was like, okay, if I can take that idea of learning from people better than me and apply it to film, I can do the same thing.
This is really amazing. Now, excuse my ignorance, I'm not American. What's Division I basketball?
So in college basketball, it's broken up into 3 divisions. Division I is where they have March Madness. So those are the level of teams that it's the highest level, and those teams play
So
in the
what you're
tournament.
telling me is this was pretty up there.
Oh, it was my dream. It was my dream. I was
How do you have two dreams at the same time?
that was my initial dream. So we have to back up a little bit. So
Please, I love to back up because I feel as though we're always sort of rushing and not getting to the good
indeed,
stuff.
indeed. So when I was a kid, I loved to write, and that was my first dream. But I also then learned I was pretty good at basketball, and that was a little bit more glamorous. So I went that route. Um, the thing is, when I got to college, I was a walk-on. That's another thing. So a walk-on is basically someone who doesn't get a scholarship, but they have to like try out and make the team. So I learned through that and another level of perseverance and hard work. But also when I got to that level of Division I basketball, I realized, oh, this is as high as I'm going to go. I actually don't have enough passion or drive to even continue on this journey. And I saw people around me who just loved on a different level. You know, a couple of them went pro, and I was like, I don't have that. I may not even be skilled enough for that. But what I do have and what I'm passionate about is writing.
Yes.
So at that time, I had that realization.
I really identify with that because I studied acting very seriously for about a year with a mentor, with a very close friend of mine who has an acting company. He's very serious. And we sat down at the end of the year and had a conversation about it. And I said, you know, this is super fun. I don't have what some of these people have. I'm very clear about it.
But you love it.
Love and this drive, and I was like, I think this is really cool, but that's about it. You know, and I'm really glad that I studied it, and I'm really glad that I learned what I learned.
Yes.
But I was not one of those people, and I don't think that you can work in a field like, you know, professional basketball or to be an actor unless you
love it.
A different level.
Yes, unless you loved it or you're exceptionally skilled. And if you're exceptionally skilled and you loved it, then you become one of the greats.
Yes,
you know?
yes. That's very interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that for a while, but that was the thing for me with acting. I was like, I will never have that drive for acting. But I have say for producing. I will never.
I understand. Yes.
That drive, you know. So you decided writing. It's interesting also that you said about basketball was more glamorous than writing, because really,
it was.
In a way, writing is the least glamorous you can think of. Don't you think? It really is the least.
It is. Unless it is, but at the same time, it's such a beautiful thing, you know, and that's why I fell in love with. It's like you're creating this world, you know, and you're living in this world with these different characters that just kind of appeared in your head. And it really is amazing. And so I realized I loved that. So I wrote my first manuscript in college. And yeah, that just, you know, snowballed. Eventually moved out to LA, and, you know, here we are.
You picked LA because by then you already knew you were going to be in screenwriting as opposed to novel writing, is that?
Well, my dream was to be a successful novelist who then transferred over to screenwriting.
Okay.
But the thing was, I also realized I needed to get out here and grow with people my age. So again, I came out here when I was 23. And I was just like, okay, I'm gonna come out here, figure it out, but I'm also gonna meet people who are also like-minded. And then eventually, when we're ready, we can make some really great stuff.
I just put a film in the chat for you that you're gonna love. Produced this movie. My friend owns a bookstore chain here in Miami, and he's produced films from books. But this film, The Man Who Invented Christmas, is about Charles Dickens, writing A Christmas Carol. And it's such a fun film. It's such a cute film. And he's in his room and he's got writer's block. But all these people are hanging out with him. Like all the people that we know from A Christmas Carol, they're all hanging out with him.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I love that.
It's such a fun film. If you're a writer, to me, it's just And because it's about the characters coming to life and running the
Yes,
show.
because that's
Running.
really how it is. Because
Mhm.
like Quentin Tarantino had this great quote about that, where it's like you start off with like the idea of the characters, and then they reveal themselves to you as the story continues. You know,
Yes,
so I
yes.
completely understand that.
Yeah, you're gonna have to watch that movie. You'll love
I
it.
will.
And yeah, so now I sort of lost the thread because I distracted us. But so you decided you wanted to be in LA and be around people who'd already done it.
Yes,
Interesting. What did you?
because I had to learn. I had to
Yeah.
learn. You know.
And when you got to LA, was that when you were working in the Apple store? Is that what you did?
Yes. So I worked there for a couple of years,
Mm.
and that was again a transformative experience because at the Apple Store, you meet a lot of people who are just very not just personable, but just very passionate about what they do outside of the store. Because at that time, Apple was really encouraging us to have, you know, different passions outside of, you know, the retail store. So we had a lot of artists because naturally it's LA. We had Grammy winners, funny enough, who were working at the store. So it was just like very talented moment in my life. Because I met another mentor there who worked with me, and he basically just fed me a lot of films, a lot of film books, you know, like Hitchcock and Truffaut. I learned like the whole French New Wave. You know, I just went a whole journey of film studying, which became really my film school.
Yes, yes. Even though you were at the Apple store, you're
Exactly.
totally validating something for me because I feel as though I just meet the best people in the Apple store.
You do. Good people.
Really good people who know like music, like in a crazy way, you know.
Yes.
And just even the technology, I just really love, and to just and also people who are very, very, very passionate about a variety of things. That's very interesting. So was it while you were at Apple that you actually started making films? Or
yes. So I made my first two short films. Well, my first short film, The Ride, that actually came out at the Apple store. And when I made that one, I realized, oh, I actually need more time to focus on this and to write. So that's when I left the Apple store and I started driving for Uber and Lyft, which then allowed me to do a lot of different things. It allowed me to manage my own schedule, allowed me to understand how to run a business, which then helped me when I started my production company. And kind of like the Apple store, because I was doing it in LA, I met a series of incredible people in that car. Because if anyone who's taking an Uber, it's like you're in a car with someone and it's just an intimate setting for a long period of time. So it's just, if you're willing to talk to people, people have amazing stories to tell you.
Yes. That's amazing. That's another place where sometimes I've been like, is it cool, kosher if I give people my card? But I've met some fabulous people. That is so true. I've met some fabulous people. But yeah, that's a great thing. So how long did you do that for? Do you still do that?
So I still do that actually. I actually made my feature while doing that. Because the thing was, after I made those two short films, and the interesting thing that happened was I made those two short films, and as I was looking at those short films, I was like, they're solid, but they're not what I really had in my head. So I was like, I need to figure out how to get better. So that's where I really went to, I guess, like the graduate level of my quote unquote self-film school, where I made a list of every winner of Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay since 1949, and then I just watched them all. So that took about a couple of years, but it gave me a foundation of like, okay, this is how stories work. Anything can really be a movie, because again, as you're watching all those movies, you learn about a whole bunch of other movies. So it's like, okay, I now have an idea of story structure in a way where I can now play with it. You know, because once you actually know the rules, then you can start playing with them.
Yes.
And that allowed me to make Meeting Miss Leigh. So the funny thing about Meeting Miss Leigh is when people first saw that.
I don't want to get there yet because I want to. I'm always like, I'm sorry. I'm always like, oh,
no worries.
So when you were going through your graduate film school that you created for yourself, what did you? So you went through every Best Picture
and Best Director and Best Original Screenplay.
And what were some of your favorites? What were some of the standouts?
Ooh, Letter to Three Wives.
The what?
A Letter to Three Wives
Oh, I
by
don't even
I think it was
know.
Joseph Manowitz.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic film. Beautifully blocked, beautifully written. All of Preston Sturges' movies, I think they're amazingly
Pick one, just so
Christmas
people,
in July.
I haven't
Christmas
seen
in
that
July.
film either.
It's a good
That's
movie.
great. That's
Um, I
What's
love
his most famous
go ahead.
film? What's Preston Sturges' most famous film?
Either I guess the Lady Eve with
Mm,
I think it's Peter Fonda. Is that
mm.
who it is? Peter Fonda and Barbara. I can't remember her last name.
Danwick?
No, Strowick. I can't remember how to say her name, but
Uh-huh.
they're the two stars. But I would say Christmas in July is probably his most famous film. I'm not
Uh,
Christmas in July. The Lady Eve.
Lady Eve. This is great. So your favorites are some of those earlier movies.
I would say I love those ones. I don't know if they're my favorites because
Oh,
I also really loved what's it called? Network,
oh yes. I haven't thought
things
about
like
that
that.
film for a while.
And naturally Braveheart. Braveheart might be my favorite movie of all time, just because
Oh,
it starts as this boy meets girl romance and
mhm.
evolves into this fight for freedom.
Right, right. Braveheart is based on the true story of William
Wallace.
Wallace. I was really shocked at the end of Braveheart because he
I
gets
was too. I
executed.
was too. And I
It,
saw that when I was like 11 years old. So that was the first movie that made me cry.
oh
Because
my
I
God,
never seen a movie where the main character dies. I was
right.
not expecting that.
In such an
Um,
awful way as
yes.
well. But I think that when talking about that movie, it's like we're so trained to have the Hollywood happy ending,
Hmm.
but it was a true story. You can't end up with William Wallace, riding
You
off
can't.
to the sunset. He gets
Oh,
executed.
I just remember my other one of my favorites, Roman Holiday.
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Amazing.
What
Yes.
do you like about that movie?
I think Audrey is she's just a revelation. Her and Gregory, they just have this really beautiful chemistry. And
Mm,
naturally, I'm gonna ruin the ending for anyone, so I won't explain why I love it. But the way it ends, I think, is perfect.
I think you should go ahead and feel free to spoil the ending.
Oh, so they don't end up together. And I think that's also something really realistic, like it's
Uh-huh,
just this moment of love, the spontaneous burst of love, I guess.
uh-huh.
Um, and just ends it ends with them realizing they had this moment, but they now have to live their lives.
Mm, mm, yes. Um, I, I think that it's just so interesting hearing you talk about these different movies. Because right now I feel as though I'm watching a lot of things that are contemporary, but I'm not, I used to be much more interested in watching older films, and I haven't done that for a while. So it's just really
You
nice
should.
to
You
hear
should.
about hear about the older films and go back to them. But yeah, Roman
Because then
Holiday.
you start to see like people pulling from them, like the Coen brothers take a lot from Preston Sturges.
Mhm.
Oh brother, where art thou is actually from this movie he made called Sullivan's Travels, where in Sullivan's Travels it's about this director who is trying to make a film based on this book called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah. So it's just interesting how you see people pulling from things of the past and make them
Uh-huh.
contemporary.
Yeah, well, there are also filmmakers like the Coen brothers who are particularly interested, or Quentin Tarantino, who you just mentioned, who are
Yes,
particularly
exactly.
interested in going into the past and revamping old films. And I mean, Quentin Tarantino's entire work is based on old films.
It is. And
Yeah.
I think you have to also be aware of that, where it's like there's so much content that's already been created, so many stories have already been told, where it's just like learn from those and then make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
There are stories that have already worked, so like take what works from them and just twist it.
Yes. So that's fabulous. So before we get into you having made the feature,
Yes.
So you're earning money, driving, and you
Mhm.
made a couple of shorts. What started you down the road of thinking, I want to make a feature film?
So that was always the goal. Once I started trying to make, once I started learning how to become a filmmaker and learning, watching all these different films, I wanted to make a feature film. So my first short that I think I sent you, The Ride, that came because I was watching all these romantic comedies.
Hmm.
So I pretty much just took a list of like the top 50 romantic comedies, and I was watching all those because I was trying to write a feature that was a romantic comedy.
Hmm.
Um, so that's how it all started. And I wrote that feature. We tried to get that one off the ground. It didn't work. Kind of just failed. But that gave me that was the impetus to write Meeting Miss Leigh.
What would make you say it failed?
Well, I don't say it failed because we're actually trying to make it right now. It just wasn't time.
What about it though?
Um, the budget was
I've never
substantial.
heard, I've never heard a filmmaker say that
Uh,
about
oh yeah. Well,
I,
when I say
I wish
fail,
more filmmakers would say it.
because I'm not scared of failure. I think failure is just like uh, it's a learning experience. So it's like, okay, it's just not time for this yet. And you know,
In,
when I look at the script
in
now,
what
I'm
sense?
really happy.
In what
I'm really
sense?
happy I didn't make it because I just wasn't the filmmaker who was ready to
Oh,
make
I
a
see.
film like that.
I see.
You know,
Mhm,
so I
mhm.
think it was a great grace that it didn't work out. Because now I'm ready. You know what I mean?
So are you saying in terms of the storytelling that you were not maybe
Yes.
mature enough?
And the level of actors. So funny enough, we gotten a really high level actor to come to the table read of my first feature.
Mm,
Um, and it was I like to call it like my origin story, where I learned first and foremost firsthand what it's like to work with like an A-lister, and I was not yet ready to handle that responsibility of shepherding their career. And that's why I was learning, where it's like when an actor, as a director, an actor is trusting you with their career,
mhm.
because you're gonna put them on the screen and everyone will see it.
Yes,
Um, and I just wasn't ready for that level yet, or for like the level of attention that film was gonna get if that person jumped on.
right.
So that was my wake up call. Like, okay, now I need to get better. And
Uh-huh.
then I did, and we were able to make Me and Miss Lee. And now it's like, okay, now I'm ready to work with that level of actor again.
With that A-lister who came to your table read, this is only the second time I've heard about that. But I
Hmm.
had a friend years ago, and she had a table read of her film in Los Angeles. And oh, now I'm not going to remember. But in anyway, an A-lister came and played her mother in the table read.
Hmm.
And I was like, damn. You know,
It,
one thing you can really be sure about with actors is they want to act.
yes, yes.
Act. I'm hoping that her name is going to come to my mind. She played the serial murderer in the John Waters Serial Mom. She played Serial Mom. If we can find that movie.
Hmm.
But she played the mother at the table read of my friend's film.
Gotcha.
And she said to my friend, I will play your mother in this film if
Hmm.
you are willing to not play my daughter.
Oh wow.
And my friend said no.
Hmm. You got to keep your integrity, you know, and like the reason you want to make the story. I
Mhm.
think that's always something you have to remember as a storyteller, where it's like, filmmaking is so collaborative, and you want other people around who will amplify your vision and clarify and crystallize it, but you don't want to change the core of the story, you
Right,
know?
right, right. But it's an interesting offer, you know,
Yeah, it is.
now years later that I see really how hard it is to land an A-lister on a film. It's a very interesting offer.
Oh,
Did you,
100%.
Emily, did you find her by any chance? Serial Mom.
On it.
Thank you, thank you. I with the A-lister who came to your table read, did you have a conversation with that person, and what was that conversation?
Oh yeah, that's actually the Fascinating story, Joanne. Because I had to get that person there. So they happened to have like an acting class on like Saturday mornings, and I just went to that class over and over again um, until I was able to get them there. Because basically, how that started was, again, it's all God. Me and my producer at the time, he gave me like a list of cast members that, or potential cast members that he thought would be perfect for the movie. One of them was this A-lister, and I thought it was an inspired choice. So I was like, okay, how do I get this person now?
Uh-huh.
So I walk into my living room, and at the time, my roommate was like, hey, my boyfriend's coming over. You should meet him. He's in this person's acting class. Now, I didn't tell her that I was looking for this person. She just
Mm.
happened to give me this information. So like,
Wow.
okay. So me and her boyfriend are talking, and I'm telling him about this movie, and he's like, "Yo, that sounds great. You should come to class and pitch him." I was like, "Oh, okay, why not?" So his class was on Saturday mornings, and again, I'm doing Uber and Lyft, so I work late on the weekends.
Mm.
So Friday night, I probably worked on till like about 3, took a nap, went to his class at like 8 o'clock. Now, my whole thing when I went there was like, I need to figure out like if we were compatible, like energy wise, like could we work together? So since he was a pretty named actor, it was about like maybe 50 or 60 people there. And once he started speaking and I heard his passion, I was like, okay, yeah, this can work. So I was like, how do I now get this moment with him? Like, how do I get this alone time? So the way the class worked was we got in a big circle, and somebody would walk into the middle and be like, I begin. And they would start doing an action. Then they say, I end. And when they ended, if people liked it, they would jump in, and then you start building a scene. So it'd be like, I begin, and like, just create something. So I saw that and I was like, okay, well, I gotta do something. So I walk in there, and I'm not active. I was like, I have to get this person's attention. So I walk in there and I say, I begin. I take off my cross, I look at it for a moment, I drop it, and I walk away and I say, I end. So it's kind of like a loss of faith moment, and people love that. So people were jumping in and we were building this scene. And funny enough, because again, this is someone who I watched as a kid. Funny enough, he started, he was like, yo, this is fire. Let me jump in. So now it's just me and him building this scene together. So I'm like, okay, this is the moment. We connected. So now I'm like, how do I get him to this table read? Or not a table, how do I get him to see my script? So we have a break during the class, and I approach him. I had this whole spiel I'd been practicing during the night, give him my whole spiel about how I, think he's an upper echelon actor, how I think he'd be perfect for this role. And he was like, send me the script. So I send it to him. I'm like, fantastic. I hear nothing back. So then I'm like, now I have to go there every Saturday and just build this relationship, So eventually he
Become
then
an
says,
actor.
exactly, you gotta do what you gotta do, So eventually he says, let's do this table read. Now, this is where things are very interesting. We have this table read, and the night before, he emails me and he's like, you know what? I'm not really feeling the script, but because I'm a man, my word, I'll show up. So now I'm thinking like, again, this is my first like, I might be 26 or 27. So I'm like, okay, how do I handle this? This is a star, and I kind of need to make sure he's okay, but I also want him to be on the part of this project. So how do I kind of play this game? What I didn't realize at the time was I really should have been more empathetic and try to understand what were his issues instead of just trying to force him into this
So
role.
good.
But
So
that's
good.
something I learned later on. That's why I was saying like I
So
wasn't
good.
yet ready to shepherd a movie like that.
Uh-huh.
So we had the table read, and the minute he kind of enters the room, I kind of feel the energy's off. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to now talk. So I asked him if we can talk outside, and then basically he just starts going in on me about like how this was a waste of his time, how he shouldn't even be here. And I'm like, okay, let's go outside because this is happening, and everyone's on the other side of the door, so I know they're hearing this. So I'm like, let's go outside. So we're walking down the street now, and it was such a surreal moment because we're in Santa Monica, and he's yelling at me, but people are then walking by, so they would be like, "Hey," and he would stop and say hi to them, and then he would come back to me. And what I really learned looking back at that was like, at least the way I see it, is that he believed in me and he wanted me to be better, you know. But I took that, I just was offended by it. Also, it
Mm.
came like we started butting heads, and
Mm.
basically ended where it was just like okay, you can just go. You can just leave. So that's how it ended. I went back up there to do the table read, and I told my producer, just send everybody home. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And my producer, thankfully, he was just like, we already got everybody here. They want to read the script. Why don't you just take a moment, gather yourself, and handle your business. So I had a moment. I had to feel my emotions because again, it was just a lot. Because again, I watched this person growing up, so like to have that altercation was just a lot for me to handle. So prayed real quick, went back in there, I apologized for him because again, he fell into, people saw like the tabloid version of him, but I had seen like a realer version of him. So it hurt me that happened the way it happened.
Yes.
So I just apologized. The table read went fantastic. But that also kind of set me up to make my next movie, because the part I forgot to say was when we were outside in Santa Monica, one of the things he said was, "You can't write, you'll never make it in this town." One of those cliche things, But as someone who has constantly heard those things, like you can't do something, and then I end up doing it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write something great. I'm gonna make something great, just to prove you wrong, and then hopefully we can work together in the future. So I don't believe in like keeping hostility or any hate in my heart. I try to forgive.
Yeah, and in hearing the story, and thank you so much for sharing, what a brilliant story. But I feel as though he was triggered by something.
He was. And I understand what was actually just because the character I'd asked him to play may have been too close to the way he was being portrayed at the time. And that wasn't really favorable. And that, again, that's awareness that I was not yet having. I just thought he was perfect for it. But I didn't realize, I just didn't realize how what a fine line that was, especially for a new filmmaker, this has been my first feature film. So yeah, I just did not understand the whole scope of the situation as I do now.
Oh, RS, thank you so much for sharing the story. What a great level of insight about that whole thing, and about it, because handling an A-lister, there's just so many more levels of complication is really what it is. Every human is already complicated, but when you add on all of the career stuff and the, if a particular A-lister is willing to go into independent projects and how they can be affected. I've met a woman who was a police officer in LA, and she started her own company where she does security for A-listers. And she said to me, people don't think of things like you're on set and you've got this A-lister and somebody has an iPhone and they shoot some footage of that A-lister picking their nose. Right? And the next thing, it's a viral video. So she was talking about security, very many layers of the security, So
100%.
So then did you drop that project and then come to your current project, or?
Dropped it for the moment. So we're now picking it back up, just because again, that budget was going to be at least like close to 10 million, like 7 to 10 million. So it was substantial. So when I was writing Meeting Miss Leigh, one of the things was I was trying to make it for a reasonable budget, but I also didn't want a reasonable budget to hamper the story. So I was trying to tell the story I wanted to tell, but in a way that was affordable. And funny enough, even though I did that, the budget still was more than I thought it was going to be. But we were able to raise that,
How did you do that? This is always, to me, this is the most fun thing.
That was a journey.
How did you raise the money for your film?
Basically, I made a pitch deck. And approached people who had believed in me because again, I was writing for a long time up to this point, maybe like 5 or 6 years. So I had like a blog for a while. So I approached those people who believed in me at that point to raise some of it. And then me and my business partner, we put up the other half. And then we went into production. One of my mentors actually told me before we went into production, because we didn't have the entire budget yet. And he was just like, go forward, even if you don't have all the money, just start and the rest will come. And I'm happy I did that, because once we started filming and I saw what we had, I was able to cut something very quickly and then use that to raise the rest of the budget.
Did you raise the rest of the budget during production?
We
or
did
after production?
during.
While you were on set?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah. It was a journey.
I can't tell you, I was just actually on the phone with one of my clients this morning, and I can't tell you how often I hear them say, you know, I've really got to have somebody else handle the producing part because I've got to be focusing and directing. You were fundraising on the set. That's
Yes.
impressive. That's impressive.
Because I had an amazing team, Joanne. That's the other thing. Like I did my part, but I had an incredible team that allowed me to do what, that allowed us to make this film.
Yeah, that's great. So it's very interesting that you've made a film that's kind of a romantic drama.
It's more romantic drama. It's romantic drama.
Yeah. But it's not what you expect, right? It's not.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the film?
Yeah, so it's called Meeting Miss Leigh, and it's about a young writer and this affair he has with this older woman over the course of a weekend in Santa Monica. So if you've ever seen like the Before trilogy, or Richard Linklater's Before trilogy with Ethan Hawke, it's very much like that, where we're kind of following these two people, as their past trauma is healed and as they kind of encourage each other to take this next step in life. Because the story really is about this guy who's stuck, and who's unable to make his dreams come true. He's afraid of taking that next step. And he meets this woman who's in a similar position, and they encourage each other to do that.
It's funny because you've talked a lot about mentors, which I feel is kind of unusual for when I do these interviews. But the film feels to me as if it's about that. I mean, I've only seen the trailer, right? So I haven't seen the film, but
in a sense, it's about growth. And I think that's the key of having a mentor. The right mentor allows you to grow, and gives you the right fuel to grow. And that's what that movie is really about, where it's these two people who are encouraging each other and pouring into one another, so that they can live the lives they want to live, but they're not yet living. Because she's running from a deteriorating marriage. So she's in this period of her life where she's like, what's my next step? Do I go back to my husband and fight for this marriage, or do I leave and build something new?
And what are his dreams? What are his questions?
So his dream is to write. He wants to write movies. He wants to direct movies, and he's unable to do that. So I guess like anything, like any art, you pull from your life.
Yeah. So what do you hope will happen with the film? What are your plans?
So far we've won an award in Montreal for Best First Time Filmmaker at the Montreal Independent Film Festival, and then we won the grand prize in Marina Del Rey. Thank you. For Best Feature, and ideally
going like across as far apart as you can get, from Montreal.
I know, right? I know. And Marina Del Rey was especially sweet because when I first moved out to LA, I landed in Marina Del Rey. I've lived there for 8 years. So the fact that that festival, supported us and we were able to play there was amazing. It's like a full circle moment.
Yes.
So ideally, Joanne, we get distribution and people can see the movie. Right.
Yeah, I would love to help you with that. We'll talk offline about that. I've been ranting and raving about this now for a while, and there's still very little being written about it. But what's been happening in the last couple of years is that filmmakers who are really making films for underserved audiences, and so African American is kind of the top one, LGBT women, they are making money on AVOD, which is advertising supported video on demand, in a way that has never existed before. And the first AVOD platform that I became aware of was Pluto TV. And they are having their 10th anniversary from when they were founded in August of this year. So that's how recent AVOD has existed. It didn't exist before. Didn't exist before 10 years ago. And people are making,
is Tubi AVOD?
yeah, Tubi is able.
Okay.
And so, you know, filmmakers are making some serious money because of a whole new income generator, right? That didn't exist 10 years ago. So obviously, you know, there's less income today in the DVD world. So, you know, things are always changing, and that income has gone down, and, you know, but AVOD didn't exist at all 10 years ago. So it's very interesting. And
It's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
and I also feel as though eventually the big companies will realize and they'll shut that down. You know what I mean?
Naturally.
Like,
Naturally.
why are all these independent filmmakers making money when we're not? You know, of course they are. So you know, that's fine. They're taking care of it.
You know how it goes. You've been in the game longer than me.
But it just feels as though it's a very exciting moment. And then
Yes.
it's also a very exciting moment because, and I don't want to make this sound as though I don't want the writers to succeed. I want the writers to succeed in the writers' strike. And now SAG looks like it's going to go on strike too. And
I saw that.
they're really making a fight for all of us, I believe, not just for writers. But this is an incredible moment to have a finished film, is all I can say.
Yes, I think so too.
It's an incredible moment to have a finished film when everything shut down. You know, the sales agent I mostly work with had this huge success, and so they were working on a series from it with BET, Bloomhouse, and then A24 wanted to come in, and all of those conversations had to stop, right? So February, March, you know, I spoke to him a couple of times and his hair was kind of you know, I'm like talking to all these people about getting this series made. They were going to go into production in June. Bam, everything's off. Even a conversation. A24 won't even have a conversation.
Oh, wow.
So to be at this particular moment with a finished film, very good.
Yes. And one that I'm proud of, because like I mentioned earlier with the short films, I love those and I'm proud of those, but they weren't exactly how I saw them in my head. With Meeting Miss Leigh, it came out like, when I watched that movie, it's like, oh yeah, I saw this. This is what I expected, you know? So that's the most rewarding part of it, where it's like a true realization of my vision.
How do you think that happened? And I'm going to open it up for questions, but this will be my last question. How do you think you were able to match? Because they say that there are 3 films when you're making a film. One, the one you have in your head when you're writing it. One, the one that you see in front of you when you're on set, and then the third one when you come to edit. Right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is exactly how it is. That's exactly how it is.
But that middle one is usually quite terrifying. But
I thought the middle one's the most fun, honestly, for me.
Well.
It was because we shot for 13 days, and we were only able to do that because we prepped so extensively. You know, and that's why I had a really great team. Where when we were interviewing people for the job, we made sure that they understood we only have 13 days. So we need you to be on your A game. Right. And thankfully, a lot of these people were also, not only were they very talented, they were also very hungry for the positions they were given. So our director of photography, Stevie Morell, he's usually a first AC. So he was ready, you know, to make this feature. He had also done a feature for BET a couple years before, and I'd seen that. And he had so much responsibility on that, where I was like, oh, if I give him the right support, imagine what he could do, you know? Yeah. And he was also really big on making sure we had the right lighting team. And I didn't realize how important that was. And I'm happy I listened to him, because that changes the whole movie. It makes an indie low budget film look like a $1 million project, you know? So like that was huge. My composer, my producing partner, Boki Vukalovic, it was just all of these people coming together, and we were united in purpose, vision, and spirit. And that's how that's how the vision translated, because I was able to articulate what I was looking for, but then allow them to do their thing. And so I think as a director, what you're really trying to do is you're just leading the ship. You know, you're just guiding the ship, and you have a talented crew. And if you can get everyone making the same movie then most likely your vision will come out on screen.
Very nice, very nice. So would anyone like to ask a question? Just raise your hand, come on screen, and you can ask RS a question. I don't see any hands raised. So
hey, Joanne, it's Diane. I can ask a question.
oh, yeah, go ahead, Diane. I didn't see you there. All right.
I just thank you. I came on the call a little late, but I love what you're sharing, and I'd love to hear more of your experience. When you talk about quote unquote failures, I love the fact that they're truly learning experiences, and either we're being redirected in some way, or it's just another learning experience. And I wish that were celebrated more, that it's just part of a process.
Yes.
So I'd like to hear more about that.
Thank you for that question, Diane. I completely agree with you. It's all a process. And I think once we realize that failure loses its sting, and you now can look at failures like objectively, like, okay, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? Do I have to learn a new skill? Let me learn this new skill and get better. Let me not shrink away from the fact that I failed. I think what really happens with failure is we're worried about what other people think. We're like, oh, everyone's gonna say I'm a failure. Everyone's gonna say, well, who cares? Like, who really cares? Just like, because eventually you're gonna succeed if you keep pushing, and then everyone's gonna talk about how they love your work, how they're such a big fan of yours. So yeah, if you can just
an overnight success after 20 years.
100%, 100%.
It's just more data,
Yeah.
Yes.
It helps us direct. All right. Thank you so much.
Diane, I think that's great, but I also think that there is a concept. I wonder if you Google this, what you'll find, but the way it comes into my head is fail forward faster.
Yes.
But there's definitely a sort of concept that's about that.
Because I completely agree with that. You want to fail forward, and you want to do it fast, because you want to get to where you want to get to, and the only way you can get there is through these failures. So like, let them happen. So like, make the things you gotta make quickly, but at the same time, it's such an interesting paradox. You want to make them quickly, but at the same time you want to make them well.
Well, there's also the saying about you can have fast, good, or cheap.
Yeah.
But you can't have all three. You get at least one, maybe two. So when we're working in the micro budget world, that's already cheap. We already picked cheap, which I think is a very smart way to go. I really believe it's a great way to go for your first film.
100%.
Spend as little money as possible. That's also a concept from the lean. What's it called? Anyway, the lean startup, which was a very big thing in Silicon Valley 10, 20 years ago. And one of the concepts of the lean startup is called a minimum viable product. And so a minimum viable product in the tech world is when, instead of saying, I need to raise $20 million to make my first product, I'm going to raise $200,000 and I'm going to put something together, with Scotch tape and glue, but it will show people what we're making. And so there are lots and lots of examples in the tech world, but I feel as though when we make a micro budget film, it's an MVP, it's a minimum viable product.
100%.
I feel as though, we're going for cheap. 13 days is fast. A lot of union people wouldn't even understand what was 13 days.
Yeah.
But to get it to be good as well, that's
that's why it was incredible, Joanne, because not only was it 13 days, some days we ended early. So the fact that we were able to end early 13 days and it was good, like it's winning awards. And because the way I also judge that as good is when people see it, they want to talk after the film. Like they want to talk to the people they came with. They have questions about the movie, like not questions like whether the quality, but questions of like, what they were talking about was interesting. It's making me examine my own thoughts on the concept. So when I hear that, when people come out of the movie, I'm like, oh, we did our job.
That's interesting about the finishing early. That's great. One of my main heroes, Barry Jenkins, runs an 8-hour
Oh,
set.
I love Barry Jenkins. He was a huge influence for this movie, actually.
Hour set.
Wait, I missed.
He runs an 8-hour set.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
So Medicine for Melancholy was
It's I wasn't gonna say, because I wasn't sure if people knew that movie, but that was another major influence.
I tell everybody to watch Medicine for
It's
Melancholy.
amazing, yeah.
And I tell them to watch it with this question. And nobody ever does what I tell them to do, just so you know that, RS, but just you and I. So Medicine for Melancholy was made for $13,000, right?
Yes.
So I asked people to watch Medicine for Melancholy and ask why that movie got into Sundance. Why do you think? Because nobody ever does what I ask them to. So you tell me why you think that movie got into Sundance.
That's a great question. I think because it's real. It has like genuine heart and soul. You know, when I watched that movie, yeah, you can tell like it was made for for a particular micro budget, but it just works. Like, it's engrossing, and I think that's the key. It's at least to me, it's a well-told story that captures the imagination.
Well, I think that there are some other elements.
Please.
I think there are some other elements. So when Medicine for Melancholy came out, it was 2008. And I think that although we had been seeing movies with African-American actors about African-American lives, I don't think we had seen.
Oh, that's true. We've not seen something like that.
Right. So to see this story about these two people who were African-American, but I'm not sure how much that was really part of the story.
It was, yeah, it's a very small part of the story. It's really about these two people.
That's right. It's two people and they happen to be African-American. And then another thing is that it's really spot on about contemporary relationships. So those two people, like, he's pursuing her, and she's really not interested.
Yeah.
Really not interested.
Yeah.
They're two people who in the 21st century know how to have sex, but they don't know how to have love. Yes. And I thought that was a very contemporary conversation.
Yes, and it's funny that heart and that soul, that film is what inspired me for Me, Miss Leigh, because yes, Me, Miss Leigh is about a white woman and a black man, but that's not really what it's about. It's about these two people having this moment. So yeah, no, I love that movie.
Yes, Medicine for Melancholy is really, really something else, because the idea that you could make anything that's coherent for 13
yes, that's incredible. It's incredible.
Because I figure, even like for $100,000, $40,000. My bottom line is $40,000. So I say for the $40,000, you can have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes. Yes.
You can have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But for $13,000 to have these two complex,
you're calling in a lot of favors. You're calling in a lot of favors to make that movie. A lot of people are working way under their rates. You're not even working for anything, honestly.
No, for $13,000,
it's really
food, production insurance,
maybe a couple locations to give the owners something, maybe. Because they didn't really have that many locations. It looked like it was like an apartment. They went to a bar, and most of it was outside. Yeah.
I think he was working with the same DP that he's still working with, because they went to college together. They went to film school together. So, but I mean, they were. I feel, as I said, my number is $40,000. Ben Wheatley, who's a famous British horror director, he says $30,000. But Barry Jenkins, 13. I don't know. But
ours was a SAG ultra low budget, so we were under the 300,000, but it was still substantial.
Yes.
Yeah. And we need every bit of it.
We expect you to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. For that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Does anybody else have a question before? I'm just having way too much fun here with RS. Just want to make sure if anyone has a question. Just raise your hand if you do. But I'm so glad that we got to talk about that, because I'm always asking my clients to watch Medicine for Melancholy. And
It's a fantastic film.
nobody ever
And
does it.
yes, it's a fantastic film.
The
Because
only
it also
reason I ask
so
them to watch
inspiring.
it- Yeah, the only
Mhm.
reason I'm asking them to watch it is so I can get to talk about it.
And also, Joanne, I think it's just so inspiring because you see where Barry went after that,
Yes.
you know, to then
Yes.
do Moonlight and then do Beale Street,
Yes.
and even Underground Railroad. It's amazing what can happen if you make if you
Railroad.
make that first feature and you do it well.
My thing is, if you make that first feature, and I'm always saying this, and one day I'm going to do it. I call my business Filmmaker Success, but one day I'm going to change it to second film. Because what you can do with your second film is so much more than
Yes.
choosing between cheap, fast, or good for your first.
Mhm.
It's really about
Yes.
it.
You can actually have a legitimate budget and you can
Yes.
take your time, you
Yes.
know?
Take your time, like 21 days,
Exactly. And then once you make something that can work on like 13 days or less, it's like, oh, 21, that's like an eternity, you know?
Yeah, coverage.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I got to hear Barry Jenkins a couple of years ago
Mhm.
give a long talk. And before I heard him give the talk, I would always say, if Barry Jenkins had been my client, I wouldn't have let him go 8 years without making a movie. So after Medicine for Melancholy, he went 8 years before he made Moonlight.
Yes.
And I said, I wouldn't have let him do that, because you can make a $300,000 movie, you can make a $500,000 movie. And then when I heard him give this very, very long talk, it was in Miami. It was in Miami, so that's already important. But he said that after Sundance with Medicine for Melancholy, he moved out to LA, like you do, moved out to LA. I'm a Sundance filmmaker, and so he pitched films for a couple of years, and he said he tried to be what he thought an LA filmmaker was supposed to be, and he got nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally quit. He decided that was it. He quit filmmaking. And it wasn't until this woman, I got to look up her name, Alexandra something with two last names, said to him she wanted to meet. She basically became his mentor. Yes. And she said, I'm going to meet with you once a week and I want you to pitch me movies. So they met for a week for a year or more. And eventually he pitched her Moonlight and he pitched her Beale Street. And over the years he had, and because of Sundance, he'd had, companies following him and waiting to see what he was going to do. And he said it wasn't until he realized he was a Miami filmmaker that he could move forward. I love that. I'm living in Miami.
But it's amazing.
So much.
I know it's amazing down there.
Yeah, well, the thing is that Miami, but for somebody like you, for somebody who's got a Jamaican flag above you, somebody from Trinidad, like Emily's in Trinidad.
It's very close. Yes.
I think that a lot of filmmakers think that they have to be in Hollywood. What Barry Jenkins said was Hollywood basically killed him.
Yeah.
He did not work for him. And as a lover of Miami, my favorite film before Moonlight was Bad Boys, the first Bad Boys.
Oh, I love that movie. Yeah.
We got a lot in common. And so the opening shot, it's like, I don't know if they did drones back then, but anyway, like a helicopter shot of Miami Beach. So Miami Beach, palm trees, Art Deco hotels, beach, Then the helicopter flies over the intercoastal, and then you get to the coastline of Miami, and it's still a little bit touristy, and then it goes inland, and it goes over the inner city of Miami, and then it drops down into basically a project, into an alley where a drug deal is happening. That's the opening shot of Bad Boys. And when I see it, I'm like, that as a Miamian,
Yeah.
all of that tourist stuff that doesn't really mean, I mean, it's cool and all that, but
That's not the
not
real
Miami.
Miami.
It's
Yes.
not Miami. And
Yes.
then this story, this, to me, Bad Boys says, we're gonna go into the real Miami.
Yes.
And it's a
Yes.
comedy and it's all of that fun, but still. And then to see Moonlight and to see a movie that grows from a Miami story, an authentic Miami voice,
Mhm.
authentic Miami characters that are actually those people in the projects, you know, and Barry Jenkins tells a story about, there's this one moment where he's looking down, the camera was set up looking down the hallway and Naomi Harris was at the other end of the hallway.
Mhm.
There's supposed to be a bedroom. She's supposed to come out of the bedroom and then she starts screaming at him.
Yes.
He had like a PTSD moment when that happened on set. That's how authentic that
Yes.
story, even though it was
Yes.
actually somebody else's story, but it was somebody else who grew up in the projects to a single crack addicted mom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I just wrote this somewhere this morning, but it's like, I believe the most important word in filmmaking today is authentic.
Yes. And that is what I think is the key to becoming a real filmmaker, is when you can tell your truth, you know, and you're not trying to tell Hollywood's truth, but your truth.
Yes.
So I understand it completely.
And you're doing that and being in Hollywood, which is even more, that's a different level.
And yeah, because it's funny you say that, because I had a similar experience where we just weren't able, me and my business partner, we weren't able to get anything made in the system. So I just turned to him one day and said, we're going to have to just build this ourselves. So that's why we started Dream With Me Productions. And he was the star of the film. So he had to go through his own journey of becoming an actor who could carry a feature, you know? So we were just, you know, supporting each other, pushing each other to be better. And that's where it goes back to like having a village, you know, creating a community of people you believe in and who believe in you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, RS, what a pleasure. You know,
Thank you.
So great to meet you and get to know you. And
one last thing, Joanne, if I can share this, there's a book I want to share.
oh yeah. Recommendation
For anyone out there,
Yes.
my first movie. It's full of interviews with filmmakers talking about their first feature film. It's Ang Lee's in there, the Coen brothers. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Very inspiring.
Great, that's great. I'm writing a book right now about my work with filmmakers, and one of the things I talk about is doing the research to find the first film. Because, for example, talking about Barry Jenkins, most filmmakers, when I ask them, they think his first film was Moonlight.
Moonlight, yeah, of course.
Right, and it's not. And so what filmmakers are always doing is comparing themselves to a
Moonlight.
film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the highest grossing best picture of all time. Because when it's 1.5 million when you compare it to Rocky, which is considered the if you adjust for inflation, yeah, it's actually a lower budget than Rocky. But people are always comparing themselves to film number. Well, I mean, Barry Jenkins is a genius, so Moonlight is his only second film, but to somebody's fifth film, to somebody's eighth film, instead of to somebody's first film.
Yes.
You know,
and it puts everything into context. And that's why I love this, where it's like, oh, okay, their first film was rough, but you can see the seeds of the filmmaker they became.
Yes, exactly. And so when you are grounded in your top 20 favorite directors' first films, not the second or fifth film, then I think you have a much more realistic look at what you could aim for in your
100%.
So good, you know, for your first film, and not do what most filmmakers do, which is set that bar too high for their first film and never make it.
Yes.
And never make it.
And that's the artist struggle. You know, the artist is always, at least in my experience, you're trying to make that masterpiece as your first thing, but that's just the wrong way to go. It goes back to what we're talking about with failures. You got to make the first couple that don't really work to eventually make the one that does.
Yes, exactly. Oh, such a pleasure. We'll
Yes,
sort
thank you for having me.
offline, you know, when we're going to talk, and yeah. So
This was amazing. Thank you.
thank you so much for coming. Thanks everybody for coming to listen and learn about filmmaking. I want everybody here to be making their first films.
Yes, go do it. It's possible.
Bye everybody. Thank you, Emily. Bye-bye.